This is Lisa from MobileTechReview, and yeah, I look like the computer merchant on the street corner, right? This is my review of the new M3 MacBook Pros. Now, doing something a little bit more interesting than what we've seen so far. When Apple sent units out to reviewers, they sent out the very base M3, the one that starts at $15.99, or otherwise known on the internet as the one that nobody should buy. We'll talk about whether that's true or not. And they sent the top of the line $4,000 M3 Max 16-inch. So, you know what? A lot of people, most people, I think, buy somewhere in the middle. I know that I do. So we have the 16-inch M3 MacBook Pro with the M3 Max, the $3,500 pre-built model, though I think a lot of people are going to buy that one. And we have the 14-inch with the M3 Pro. It's kind of the upper SKU of it. It's the one that's $23.99, call it $2,400. But I sort of think it's kind of the wise buy. Anyway, we're going to look at the performance between the two of these and compare them to older Mac models. We're going to look at it now. All right, so a little background about all the configurations for those of you who haven't already read everything you could read and watched everything you can watch on these, but it's a little confusing at this point the way Apple has done the lineup. First off, there's the new base model 14-inch M3, not M3 Pro or Max, just base M3, much like what you would find in a MacBook Air or the new 24-inch iMac that just got refreshed with the M3 processor. Why is it such a low-end configuration? Because they finally axed the Touch Bar 13-inch MacBook Pro. This basically replaces it. You get the 14-inch display, you get the Retina XDR experience and all that sort of thing, but it's a bit deconfigured. The M3 processor base is just fine for a lot of people doing everyday kind of work. You're not all out there doing Blender renders all the time, are you? A lot of you just use Zoom, some Photoshop, all that sort of stuff, right? It has 512 gigs of storage. That's fine with me. Only 8 gigs of RAM. This is why the internet has labeled it with a big "you should not buy." Well, you can also configure with more RAM, up to 24 gigs. So it's not that bad, people. You just need to up-configure it. They wanted the low price point since it's replacing the 13 Pro. Anyway, that's the base model. So that model is there for those of you who are thinking about 13-inch Pro. More power to you. I have nothing against that config. I do say go with more than 8 gigs of RAM, though, if you can get it with, you don't have to go all the way to 24, just go up to the 16, that kind of thing. Yeah, good idea. We're going to focus on the M3 Pro and Max, the kind that you can get in the store configurations without doing build to order. So the 14-inch M3 Pro that we have is the one that's, like I said, $2,400, $23.99, and that gets you 1 terabyte of storage, which is why I think there's a $2,000 model and just get a couple of fewer cores on the CPU and GPU, not enough to make a huge difference, but you might as well go for this $400 upsell and double your storage. Okay, you get 18 gigs of RAM. You get a 12-core CPU on board, 6 performance, 6 efficiency cores, and you get an 18-core GPU. Not bad, okay? And of course, all the base stuff is the same as the previous generation. The port layout and all that sort of thing. And for our 16-inch model, we went with the $3,500 configuration. Again, the one that you can just walk into a store and buy without building to order. That gets you 36 gigs of RAM. That's nice. I think that's adequate for a lot of people. If you need more RAM because you're doing some professional work that requires that you know who you are. If you're asking yourself, geez, do I need more RAM? I really don't. And you have no clue, you probably actually don't, especially because macOS handles RAM very efficiently. It also has 1 terabyte of storage. And interestingly enough, we have a 14-core CPU and a 30-core GPU. So you've got 8 performance cores and you've got 4 efficiency cores on board. That's a nice configuration. That should be significantly more powerful than the M1 Max, for example, and reasonably more powerful than the M2. That gets me into this. Okay, so I know when the M1 processor came out, it was a leap in computing, in the ARM architecture, the battery life, the thermals, all that sort of thing, plus performance that was nothing to shake a stick at, really good, holds its own against Windows and all that sort of thing. That's all true here, but we're going incrementally now from 1 to 2 to 3 in the M lineup. So if you're expecting something that's going to be an earth-shattering reason to upgrade from your only just released 10 months ago M2 processor, no, don't worry about it too much. However, the performance jump from the M1 Max, which I happen to own, is significant. Is it going to make a difference to you? We're going to talk about that in depth a bit, but the thing is, when you're talking about machines that are already so incredibly fast, okay, for the videos that we edit, ProRes 422, 4K video, 30 frames per second, Bcam footage, graphics, effects, all that sort of thing. That's like, nothing for an M1 Max or even an M1 Pro, to be honest. So if you're going up to an M3 Pro or Max because you need that to be faster, probably it's going to be overkill. But for those who are doing even more professional stuff, you call YouTube, and even though I'm a YouTuber, semi-professional. Those of you who work in the broadcast industry, you don't just have Bcam footage. You've got 8 cameras rolling that you have to put together. You've got more fancy motion graphics, maybe you're even doing 8K work. That's where upgrading to an M3 line might make some sense for you. And the real improvement with the M3 line is the 3D graphics. This was a sore spot for the M1 and the M2. And if you compare it to Windows laptops, say for doing Blender work, if you're using Redshift, that sort of thing from Macs on, it was like, yeah, now Mac's still not that fast, even though the CPU performs as well as an Intel Core i9 current generation and all that sort of thing. So this is where the leaps and bounds happen. We have mesh shading, we have ray tracing support, we have up to twice as fast performance for 3D rendering. So that shows in Blender 4.0 beta. I only expect that to get better. That's early release times there. That shows in Redshift and in Cinema 4D products. It's huge because a lot of people are doing that these days for concept artwork, for animation, for all that sort of thing, and for gaming. Much as Apple focused on gaming, I mean, they're showing like Resident Evil playing on an iPhone. I don't know. Personally, I don't want to play Resident Evil on such a tiny screen, but I'm thinking, yeah, the same architecture is going to be here for M3 iPads and M3 Macs. It gets more interesting with the bigger screen to me. So we have that horsepower now, and that's great. I'm playing Resident Evil Village and Baldur's Gate 3 at native resolution. So we're talking like nearly 4K-ish resolution, and it's great. We got frame rates pegged at 60 frames per second. Nice, right? And so the only hurt is going to be, it's chicken and egg, right? There's not a lot of AAA titles out there for the Mac compared to Windows. So whether this gets developers more involved, potentially, let's hope. Probably also because of the iPad. iPads sell a lot of games. It's not that much work if you've got it working on an M3 iPad that might be coming out to get it working on the Mac. So it's promising for that too. But as a professional workstation kind of laptop, which is where Apple's been positioning their MacBook Pros for a long time, now it's got the chops to do the 3D part of the equation. So that means, it's always great for Photoshop, for anything 2D, Final Cut, Premiere Pro, but now can compete in the 3D space. All right, so we've talked about Blender. You've seen Blender running on screen, all that sort of thing. What about some other benchmarks? And this is not my favorite, but Graphics Bench Aztec Ruins. I mean, just because it doesn't get updated that often, I really don't know what it's indicative of, but running it at 1440p. Performance for the M3 Pro 14-inch that we have is similar to an RTX 3070, so that's not bad. Getting into something a little bit more useful and cross-platform these days, we have Geekbench 6. And in Geekbench 6, we can certainly see an improvement from the M1 Max to the M3 Max, but even the M3 Pro, that little old 14-inch M3 Pro there, is running circles around my M1 Max. And the performance on the M3 Pro is about like a current generation Intel Core i7 H series processor. If you're looking at the Max, you're looking at as good as an overclockable Intel Core i9 for laptops H series gaming level processor. Nice. Now, in Geekbench, I didn't see the graphics differences I expected to see in Metal and OpenCL going through these, but again, work in progress for some of those benchmarking things. When we look at Cinebench, if you go to Cinebench R23, the older one, you can see the performance improvements right there on screen. It's significant. If we go to their new Cinebench 2024, you can see that an M3 Max with a 30-core GPU is almost twice as fast as the M1 Max with a 32-core GPU. Now, of course, Apple, when they're showing off some of their fancy stuff there, they're showing you with the 40-core GPU model, that's $4,000. So you can get even better numbers than these, assuredly, depending on how much money you want to spend. But again, we're kind of in the real world where most people are going to be spending their money. Now in 3D Wildlife Extreme Unlimited, you can see, certainly if you're thinking about this for gaming or for 3D rendering kind of work, that going from an M3 Pro to a Max is worthwhile. That's a big jump in performance. But going from an M1 Max to an M3 Max, not a huge improvement there. But the interesting thing to note right here is, take a look at this. The Razer Blade 14 with the latest Ryzen 9 from AMD processor and RTX 4070, our M3 Max with a 30-core GPU actually beat it in Wildlife Extreme Unlimited. So take that, world of PCs. All right, that's a lot of feeds and speeds, and now you get the idea about some of the performance if you're going for the middle of the lineup machines, all right? So what else is there to talk about? The design is the same as last generation. Your port layout is the same, unless you go with that new 14-inch base model that loses one of the Thunderbolt ports. So you've got HDMI 2.1, that's nice to have, so you can drive high refresh displays if you have an HDMI 2.1 compliant monitor. Here's some weird things that are going on though with all of this. So RAM, with the base M3, maxes out 24 gigs. The M3 Pro, regardless of size of machine you pick, maxes out at 36 gigs. Yes, these are weird numbers. We're not using the usual multiples that you see of 16, 32. Anyway, if you want more than 36 gigs of RAM, and again, you know who you are if you actually need that. Not, I think a lot of people do, but then if you do want that, you can go all the way up to 128 gigabytes now, only on the M3 Max processor. Storage sizes are going to vary here. You can go all the way from 512 gigabytes all the way up to 8 terabytes, but each one is tiered. You want 8 terabytes, you have to get a Max processor. Let's talk about display connections. The very base M3 and the 14-inch, you can connect one external display. Now with all these, you can drive the internal panel as well, so functionally you have two displays to look at. But anyway, you can connect one display. If you go with the Pro, you can connect two external displays. If you go with the Max, you can connect 4 external displays, including crazy up to 240 hertz refresh rate, 8K display supported. So for those of you, and I know you're out there, who do use a lot of monitors, there's another thing that might drive you from one tier to the other. The displays are still the same Retina XDR mini LED high resolution displays with gorgeous color, P3 gamut, well calibrated. Brightness has gone up from 500 nits to 600 nits in SDR, standard dynamic range. You've got 1000 nits for HDR mode and 1600 nits peak brightness on them. So largely the same experience, just a little bit brighter there with the displays. Okay, yes, new for this year, it's some people, it seems to be all they're talking about in their reviews, is space black. And space gray is gone. Now you've got silver, and you can see our comparison. I'm using an iPad Pro 12.9 inch for silver because we don't have a silver Mac, but space black is not really black, it's deep space gray, I would call it. It's a very dark gray. It's a nice looking machine. That's great and all. They say it doesn't show many fingerprints. It helps that it's not absolutely black. Look at it next to a black Razer Blade 14. That is black. Anyway, it doesn't show fingerprints that much. What it does do is it shows dust, like any dark thing though. So for those of you who have OCD, you might still want to rock silver. Battery life is the other thing. Apple's about efficiency with this generation, and battery life is already extreme on these, and it's gotten more extreme. So they're adding like up to 3 hours of claimed battery life on these. You know, I was using the 14-inch M3 Pro, just doing everyday productivity work, a little streaming, that sort of thing, for an hour and a half, and the battery was still at 100%. And that's with auto brightness on and set in a fairly bright room, so pretty bright. This is insane, and that's what's meaningful still talking about these Macs versus Windows PCs. The fact that you got this kind of battery life, I mean, you're at double of anything that's going to be competing in the world of Windows, be it an Ultrabook, and you can compare this to a gaming laptop too, because you've got performance closer to gaming laptops with these, but Ultrabook level power consumption and heat generation. It's insane. The other thing is the noise and the heat. It's just not there. It's like so delightful to play Resident Evil Village and to not have to put on headphones to drown out fan noise. You hardly hear the fans ever on these. Yes, Apple tunes it so you don't have to hear the fan much, and they'll let the CPU temperatures run high. I won't lie. There are times when running some benchmarks and stuff like that, these CPU cores will hit 100 before they drop back down and throttle a little bit. But overall, temperature is so well managed. You're not going to burn yourself if you have this on your lap or touching it with your hands. It's fantastic. And getting back to battery life and performance is the fact that unlike Windows PCs, performance, and we run our benchmarks plugged into AC power because Otherwise, the whole system throttles back to try to preserve battery life on this. With the Mac, you run it unplugged, you get the same performance level as you would when you're plugged in. So you do want to play games on the go, or you need to do some Final Cut rendering or whatever it is in the field, you can do that without having it run at a snail's pace. And if you are doing demanding work, okay, with the 16-inch M3 Max, which would be one of the worst cases for battery life, most performance CPU, bigger screen, bigger battery too, 99.9 watt hour versus 70 watt hour in the 14-inch. But even doing really heavy demanding work, I was getting 6-7 hours. And that was really pushing the thing really, really hard. Where on a Windows laptop of similar performance ability, I would be looking at about 2 hours. So as ever, yes, I would love to see every generation of an Apple processor make leaps and bounds. This time it only did in 3D and 3D rendering, which is nice, and adding ray tracing. But the other thing to keep in mind here is still the efficiency and the performance, and the fact that these can be truly portable without compromising on heat, noise, battery run times is still where they're winning. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid.